Oh. This is odd. Lori, if you wanna. Can you see us, Lori?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay, great. All right. We are live. You're all set.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to our regularly scheduled GovUp committee meeting for today, Monday, August 5th, 2024. At the table, we have Councillors Leonard, Councillor Fournier, Councillor Schaefer, Councillor Haas, Councillor Fish, Councillor Dean, Councillor Trimble, myself, Councillor Yaqub Aga, and I always have to refer to my notes as to who is a voting member on this committee. We have Councillor Dean, Councillor Leonard, Councillor Fournier, and Councillor Chair Peltier is not here today. So, oh, these are not on the, who's on the committee, voting members? Councillors Fish, Haas, Schaefer, and Trimble. Okay, we'll need your votes tonight. We have plenty of items on this agenda. So we also have Courtney O'Donnell, who is Assistant City Manager. And can we start off with the first item, Courtney?
Yes, just real quick though, Jamie, Lori, can you see us?
Yes,
I guess it's just not showing us ourselves, so that's okay. All right.
maybe your camera is turned off from you.
It might be. That's okay though. We can keep going. Yes, this first item is a referral. Actually, it had first reading at the last council committee meeting, and this is related to accepting and appropriating funding for the supplemental nutrition education grant funding. And we have Jamie Comstock from Public Health to give an overview of that.
Hi, so this is a program that we have worked on and held in our department since 2012, I think. And it provides nutrition, it provides for staffing to provide nutrition education to people who qualify for supplemental nutrition assistance program. And we provide this in Penobscot and Piscataquis counties. We have 4 nutrition educators who do this, generally speaking, kind of in the school year. They concentrate mostly on providing service in schools. And then when school is out, they transition to doing a lot of adult intensive programming. So we are in, I think it's the 2nd extension year. So there was a 5-year grant cycle. Last year, the contract was extended for a 6th year, and this year there's also an extension. So we are receiving a little bit more money than we received last year, so that's nice. And I'm happy to take questions from anyone.
Any questions?
Move approval.
Second.
Awesome. So we have a motion and second, so it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
So I think I have one question here.
Okay.
So now for the 2nd year, it has been extended. Do we expect this to be extended every year? Like, what are the expectations for future, allocation of this money?
Thank you. That's a great question. And every year that it's been extended, I've expected a new RFP. So the entity that holds this grant is the University of New England. So the state had issued a request for proposals, and UNE, for all of the years actually, we had an original 5-year grant term, and then now we're in the 2nd 5-year grant term. So I expect that they'll have to issue a new request for proposals at some point. And so it could be next year. And if it's not, then we'll go into an 8th year, a 3rd year extension.
Okay, thank you. I guess we're set with this item since there are no other questions. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's it. Thank you.
And I did check. We can see all three screens on YouTube.
Perfect.
Mhm.
It's actually kind of nice not being able to see yourself, I think.
Okay, move to the second item on the agenda.
Yes,
Introduction of homelessness response manager and point in time count update.
yes. We're welcoming to the table Jen Jones.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
So Jen is now on her first day of her 7th week.
Yes.
She's very excited to be here. So Jen actually spent the last 2 years as the Director of Policy and Advocacy with the Maine Council on Aging. So working through the legislative process, bringing together a diverse number of stakeholders, working through different and conversations from different perspectives and coming to a consensus, maintaining relationships, building consensus. So she's been a great fit in her 6 weeks. She spent the first 6 weeks sort of out and about and meeting with folks and actually seeing what's happening in the community, what's happening on the ground, what's happening from an agency perspective. And obviously, we've talked a lot as the council about a point in time count, so the data just came out, so she's very data driven. And she's very excited to start this as her introduction to you all.
Indeed, I am. Thank you so much. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the 2024 point in time count, also known as the PIT count. You're likely already familiar with this, as this is a yearly effort mandated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It is required that anyone receiving federal assistance under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act has to conduct one of these counts every year. It's required that you conduct the sheltered count every year, but then you have the opportunity to also conduct the unsheltered count is also required, but it's on an every other year. However, many communities, including Bangor or the state of Maine rather, conduct both counts on the same night. This year's count was conducted on January 23rd. There is the bulk of the effort is focused on the night of the count, but you do have a number of days following to get all of the information gathered, collect all of the information from the respective groups who are out there sort of canvassing the territory. And then all of that information gets sent to Maine Housing, who then sort of compiles and publishes their PIT count report, which just came out at the beginning of June. There is obviously a lot of interest in this particular count, as it is sort of one of the hallmarks of the availability of data that we have for this population that we're trying really hard to serve. You've likely heard already that data is a challenge as it relates to really understanding not only the needs, but the context surrounding people who are unhoused in our community. So the count is conducted using a series of providers and volunteers. As Maine is representative by one COC or continuum of care, which is to say the pipeline, as it were, that folks kind of move through as they kind of move from a status of being unsheltered or homeless to hopefully moving into permanent supportive housing. The state is broken down into hubs, right? We know we are Hub 7, and our effort is led by Hub 7's coordinator. The coordinator is responsible for not only engaging all of the providers who assist with the night of the count, but also the volunteers. The volunteer effort is pretty impressive. So not only do you have the usual players who are out, including city, public health, public safety, Department of Corrections, etc., but there are also a number of community organizations that assist as well. Wabanaki Public Health is involved, Hope for Homeless is involved, the Bangor Public Library is involved. There are a number of groups who come together to really make this effort possible. As the goal in the count is really to assess in totality the number of individuals who are unhoused that you have in your community. The volunteers and providers are broken up into teams, and then they are sent out into the hub. Now, the Hub 7 is comprised of more than just Bangor. It's all of Penobscot County and Piscataquis County as well. So you've got quite a significant area to canvass in a relatively, short period of time. attempting to, connect with a population that can be difficult to access. And this is also conducted in generally some of the coldest times of the year. So as a general rule, the focus is really on shelters. But you do also have teams who are looking to go out and identify where unsheltered individuals are in the community so that we can connect with them and assess, from a numbers perspective, how many folks we have. Now, the goal is really to identify where folks are and to identify sort of which subcategory they would fall into. Is this person an individual? Are they a member of a family, or are they youth? And then from there are additional questions and data points that these volunteers attempt to gather. Folks do have the opportunity to not engage as well. So it is possible that volunteers and providers would be out canvassing the community, and some folks just simply will not engage. So it's really important that we are taking all of this context, into view as we start to parse through some of the numbers and the data that we're given. One of the trickier elements of, I would say, the point in time count is that this information is gathered at the community level and then it's filtered up into a state level. It's not broken down again by community unless you ask. Now, this is kind of the way things are at this point in time. We are working really diligently, not only with Maine Housing, but also with our Hub 7 coordinator to really get a feel and a flavor, if you will, for who are these individuals in our community and what do they need for services and supports. So you'll notice that in your packets, I've included a couple of tables. The first table is really the breakdown of the COC data. This is to say the statewide data in its aggregate. And it really breaks down folks into just a couple of categories. You'll note that unsheltered, transitional housing, sheltered, and emergency hotels are all included, and that there's significant variation across categories from year to year. There's also significant variation from year to year in what's collected. You'll likely remember that in 2021, when COVID was at a particular peak, there was a very limited count conducted. And in some cases, many continuums were not able to conduct a count at all. You'll notice that some of the data trends up and down over certain categories. If you look at the PIT count total all the way to the right, you'll note that the number 2,695 is the total reported for 2024. However, Maine Housing has added a caveat with this data that it is not necessarily indicative of a marked decrease in the numbers of people experiencing homelessness in our state, but rather it reflects changes in program availability and supports that people received during the pandemic. Hotels, emergency hotels, were a pretty big source of housing for folks at a time when the need was particularly dire. Those programs have since ended because of the nuances associated with things like the definition of who is homeless and what counts and what doesn't. You'll note that roughly 1,000 fewer folks that you're seeing isn't necessarily indicative of those people being transitioned into permanent supportive housing. It's rather people are falling back on types of housing that are not included in HUD's definition. For example, couch surfing or doubling up with a friend is not considered homeless under HUD's definition, and thus it was not included in 2024's count. Those people were included in previous years because they were likely accessing benefits like emergency hotels that are no longer available. I have provided in table 2 a bit of Hub 7's data. I was able to connect with Hub 7's coordinator, who did provide what they were able to from Maine Housing, but you'll note that it is also not particularly robust and rather only offers insights in terms of where folks were identified during the night of the count and in the days following, not inherently, who these people are, what their needs are. We don't have a lot of disaggregated data broken down, particularly at the community level, which makes responding and addressing those needs particularly difficult.
Yeah, Councillor Fournier.
Can I just back up on
Please
the
do.
couch surfing
Yes, sir.
aspect? So will they incorporate that going forward, or how's,
That would have to be a definition change in
Yeah.
order, as I understand it, the definition of homelessness would have to change in order for those folks to be included. And there are subtle shakeups like this, in terms of discrepancies about maybe what HUD collects, what Maine Housing reports. For example, transitional housing was not included in the 2022 count, but it was included in the 2023 count. This relates also to sort of changes in definition and what Maine Housing considered to be homeless versus what HUD considered to be homeless. Recently, starting in 2023, Maine Housing opted to follow HUD's reporting and included transitional housing in their reports, which is why you see some of those numbers fluctuating as well. But previous to that, Maine Housing didn't elect to include that information in its point in time report.
so is there an accounting for those group of individuals at all that are receiving the services?
Not to my knowledge,
No,
not in this count.
right, yeah, okay. It just seems to be a gap.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, there are a couple.
Yes, Councillor Fish.
Do we have any data pre-COVID to sort of compare, with the contrasting, the expanding and contrasting of services? Because there was a lot of funding,
Mhm.
government money during COVID, incoming out of COVID. And now that a lot of that money is evaporating, so we're gonna see more homelessness, but we don't know if we're trending back to what was ever normal, or just to kind of have a comparison.
Mhm.
Now that the funding is kind of come and gone back, are we sort of getting back to numbers we saw previously? Or are they still very elevated, so that we might know why, and not only, who the individuals are and what their needs are, but where they've come from.
Mhm. Certainly, anecdotally, the things that I'm hearing from the community is that the increase in the shortage and availability of affordable housing for people in need has really pushed this crisis to the brink. And that the instances of homelessness, not only the instances of chronic homelessness, but the instances of folks experiencing transitional homelessness from, say, an eviction or the loss of housing, is increasing with very few options in terms of, where folks are going to go. Once, they are moved into the continuum and they do start to engage with services.
I think, obviously this is a huge concern, housing, and for a rural state, when we have people moving here from out of state and they look at our housing, they cannot believe for our income, the average income for, the main person compared to other states where the average income is much higher, our housing is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
So this is, a key concern and focus for us. But likewise, I think is also a key concern and frustration is to see that we have a lot of people here homeless that are in certain places that aren't necessarily part of this group. We should be trying to help and focus and trying to keep people in their homes, help them transition in place. So I just think that Bangor has this unique situation with a couple of encampments that are really, I think, bringing some issues and coming from elsewhere. And somehow, I don't know, hopefully with you on board, somehow we can get a little more data on that and see how we can get our hands around that a little bit better.
We are certainly committed to, working with the incredible partners providing services on the ground with Maine Housing, with our Hub 7 coordinator to get as much data and information on the status, right, of the situation as possible. And we have a mind to, thoroughly understand the needs of the community as we, continue to identify solutions for folks.
Thank you.
I look forward to bringing you more information on that.
Looking forward to having you on board. Thank you.
I appreciate your answer about the reasons why, behind the rising numbers of unhoused in the community. I mean, inflation, lack of affordable housing, and the list goes on. But talking about data, and I think if you remember when the HUD team came to Bangor, we started the data collection. And so where are we now in that process? Are we still doing that? I think we have ignored this question for a few months now. So if we can have.
It's very complicated, as I'm sure you understand. And one of the reasons that the situation is as complicated as it is because the program and platform that collects the homelessness data in the state from the providers who are, engaging with services, is not exactly user-friendly or particularly intuitive or really meeting the needs of the system at this point in time. And unfortunately, one of the things in our recent conversations with Maine Housing in particular is that this is a recognized gap. And there are people, Admin Housing currently working to identify how can we better collect, aggregate, disaggregate, and share information so that not only do we understand from a state perspective, but we can also give the communities across the state the tools that they need to understand the populations, right? In our spaces. So I think that one of the things that we can do certainly is to, maintain, grow the relationships that we have with providers and folks who are working on the ground so that not only, we're getting information that's de-identified, but that will still give us contextual information about sort of the makeup and the needs of the folks who are experiencing homelessness. While we also work with our state partners to say, this really isn't meeting the needs of the communities, the providers, or the people who need the services. Unfortunately, because of the way that the program was constructed and because of how information is not adequately shared and for a number of other reasons, the systems aren't talking to each other in a way that they really need to talk to each other in order for seamless delivery of service and coordination of resources.
So we're back to where we started, before where we started with the HUD, when the HUD team came. So we're back to the same.
So we do have, that problem hasn't gone away because we don't have complete control of it.
That's right.
We do have a list of individuals, what's referred to internally as our by name list. So we do have a list of individuals and we meet every week to talk about where folks are on those lists. So we do have that, and we do know, for example, how many individuals we've housed. We know who's working with who, but it's a very lengthy process to get somebody through.
Yeah.
The problem, when we met with Maine State Housing, the issue becomes the information isn't entered into what's referred to as the HMIS system in that way. So there is no location. So even though there's a field that could be used for that, it isn't. And even if it were, if an individual is enrolled with a particular organization or agency, we can't even see that.
Right.
All we can see is that the individual is in the HMIS system. We can't go beyond the barrier because we're not the provider.
Right.
And
And
we've
the-
said we've got to find a way to they've agreed that using an HMIS number is a way to de-identify so that you could identify how many times this person has been contacted. Because all of that is supposed to be documented in HMIS. So yes, we have a by name list. Yes, we have weekly conversations about where folks are, so we know generally where they are. But it has to all be done manually.
Right.
And it is basically a triple entry system because the agencies have to put things in HMIS, they have to put things in their own internal system. And now we're asking them to do it through another means so that we can actually have a conversation about what's happening in our community.
At the provider level, I wouldn't say that it is the most effective system, but at the provider level, I get the sense that providers feel that it meets their needs in terms of what's being asked of them. It's not complete, and it's not necessarily that every provider is entering all of the same information, which does prove its own challenge. But one of the things that's particularly challenging about the situation right now is that the system isn't set up for providers who need to work together to be able to effectively share information and collaborate. So if someone is being, if somebody is unsheltered and working with an outreach worker, for example, that outreach worker wouldn't be able to go in and see, for example, if that person has engaged with a shelter and what programs they might have been able to set someone up with. So it's not particularly intuitive. And there's certainly some room for improvement. And unfortunately, all of this difficulty means that it is incredibly difficult to go into the program and pull community level information. So while all of the information might sit in that system, it's really not designed to be able to be pulled, disaggregated, and then reported out.
Yes, Councilor Fish.
In this day and age with technology and computers, it just seems frustrating that this data, I mean, I kind of feel it is possible. I don't think it's so impossible to me. I feel like there's more reluctance with these people working together, the services. Is that because they're competing for the same dollar or the same, are these state, federal, nonprofits? What are all of these services? I heard there's 35 to 40 different types of services. And the fact that in this day and age, we don't have a database to know who we can help more effectively. I mean, what's the reluctance? What's the core of the issue?
The core of the information, so far as I've been able to assess, really seems to be about the ability to share information, not the willingness. So in my visits with providers and folks who are doing work on the ground, the communication between, outreach workers and shelters and substance use, providers and mental health agencies is incredible. The amount of times that I've seen a worker or someone pick up the phone and just be like, hey, I need to know this information, like, can you help me out? Is amazing to see the connections and the collaboration that happens on the ground. It's the system that's not designed to lift that work up and make it function in a way that doesn't put extra burden on top of the providers to then go out of their lane and share information.
Maine Housing did indicate that they are looking at replacing this system. But what we also know is that will be a long time. And what we know is we've got to have, in essence, a separate system locally. And we need all of the partners to be willing to be participants with us, to be able to adequately track what's happening in our community. And we've been building that, but it's every day is a struggle.
Councilor, sorry.
Is there a report available that would show us how many of the unhoused have been housed in, say, the last month, or even a quarterly report?
No.
Why do we not have a local report?
So that would all come out of the hub.
Aren't we the ones that are housing a lot of them?
So there's two pieces. If an individual is housed with a permanent supportive housing voucher, it is done through the hub coordinator position. Now, we have a person on staff who may help facilitate and find units for them. But all of the housing is done at the hub level. We do find units at times for individuals, for example, for GA. We may be able to help somebody out through GA, but no, that's gonna come from the hub coordinator. Anecdotally, we can come up with several that we've housed just because we know, and we sit in the weekly meetings with outreach. So we know, for example, but we're really focused on a subset of the population, not the entire population.
At the provider level, it's available. Bangor Area Homeless Shelter just put out this great post on social media that has sort of their, I think it was their 2024 breakdown.
Yep.
that shows how many clients they served, how many people are in, permanent supportive housing. And it's a lovely little breakdown, but you couldn't go into the system and pull that information in a way that would give you a uniform report for all of the shelters, for example.
So talking about the report, so we can't, as a council, ask for this report from Hub 7?
We have.
We're working on it.
We're working
So-
to get that out of them we're hoping that they will be here in September
Okay.
to answer, because I think there are a lot of questions when they came earlier. The hub coordinator wasn't able to be here. I think there were a lot of questions about data. So we've asked both the Hub 7 coordinator as well as Main State Housing
Okay.
to come in and talk to you, because we know you have questions and
Yeah.
we have questions.
Yeah. And this is a priority, is really to be able to understand, through data and context, who are the people that we're trying to serve in our community.
Councillor Fournier?
Sounds as though all the caseworkers are working together and the providers are working together, which is probably
Huge.
first and foremost thing that needs to be happening,
It's-
and it's being done, so that's great. I really appreciate your report. This is very enlightening. We really do need Hub 7 here to
Mhm.
figure out what the heck is going on. And then we need to boil down to how to correct some of the issues here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Thanks, looks like no more questions. Thank you.
Thank
She
you
made
very
it to her first one.
Oh, we could have done that.
I told her you were nice.
The third item.
Yes, the next item is an update on the Kenduskeag Stream Trail. We have Tracy Willett, Parks and Rec Director. There's some stuff going on. I thought it was a good time to check in.
Good evening, yes, as Cindy Manager indicated, just a quick update on a couple of things that are happening along the Kenduskeag Stream Trail. Brief background, in 2016, through a council order, we were approved to work with a group called the Friends of the Lower Kenduskeag Stream folks. The big project at that time was to take out a dilapidated set of steps and create a switchback from the end of the bridge up to the back of Co Park. They were instrumental in helping us with the grants and pieces in the grant, and we were awarded funding to complete that project. Since that time, the group's been pretty active through varying stages, and certainly the last few months and probably last year, been doing consistent work days, et cetera, along the section of the stream between Franklin Street and the bridge out here on Hollow Street. Currently, they'd like to partner with the city to work with Department of Conservation and Forest Service for a invasive plant management plan. And as the landowner, that involves us. So we'll be working with them on that. A couple of other projects we're working on was starting the process to install some lights down there. Our state electrical division is working with us to locate potential locations along the section of the stream from the bridge heading toward Harlow, and then back from the parking lot on Court Street back toward the bridge. If you've been on the trail and those sections of the trail, the geography and topography is a little tricky. So it could be some slow going for us, but we're gonna give it a try. There's a fixture out on Corporate Drive that they just installed that directs lighting down to the ground, so it won't be flooding the trail, which we think will work well, and looking forward to trying it. We've also done some work in the last few years with retaining wall. We installed some crossing signals on the bridge out on Valley Avenue when the trail crosses the stream. And I mentioned the switchback trail earlier, so looking forward to working with folks. Again, they've been a real good partner for us down along that section of trails. Pretty good group to work with, and that trail is a fantastic urban downtown resource that we appreciate having the group work with us.
Awesome. Questions? Councillor Fournier.
The lighting, it looked into solar. Are you doing electrical?
We're doing electrical, so we have power. We installed lights, and what I forgot to mention, and it's what brought the power, is electrical repurposed the lights from the Orr Bridge down along the pedestrian bridge down here. So we had power installed there. So we'll be able to continue that line, and we also have power available to us in the parking lot on Court Street, so going along, if there's a section of the trail where we can utilize the solar fixture, absolutely do that. But in this section of trail, the solar lighting is because of the vegetation, the growth is,
That's right.
yeah, it's a little
Yeah.
tough, so if indeed there's an opportunity to use solar fixtures, for sure, for sure.
Any questions?
Perfect, thank you.
I think I just had a comment about collaboration between folks and the city of Bangor. I think this is awesome, and I want to comment on this for those who are following us on YouTube now, or who are gonna watch the meeting later, that Friends of the Lower Kenduskeag Extreme, they do a lot of
They
good
do.
work there, and if they want to volunteer, those who have been asking, they can refer to this group.
Yeah, that's great, appreciate you saying that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next one.
Yes, up next is a charter amendment. We have City Solicitor David Sebchek joining us. Yeah, I'll let him explain it.
Hi. So, in response to a citizen inquiry, the legal department looked into one of our charter provisions. It's in Article 6, Section 3 of the charter. It's been in there for a long time. The provision says the number of said petitions for candidates for any office that may be signed by any voter shall not exceed the number of candidates to be elected to said office. What that means is, for example, at the upcoming city council election, there are 3 positions to be filled. So any citizen who wants to sign a petition for a candidate can only sign up to 3 petitions and no more. The legal department looked into this, and the legal department determined that that's of questionable enforceability. So staff is recommending that we remove that provision. So it would basically just be a deletion of not even a full sentence, one phrase in the charter, which would be a charter amendment as opposed to a charter revision. A charter amendment affects a detail, or as opposed to some sort of a big revision of the city charter. And so the process is more simple, and it would involve a council order that would schedule a public hearing on the issue and would describe what the proposed change in the charter would be, publishing in the newspaper. A public hearing would be held then, and then a vote either right after the public hearing or shortly thereafter as to whether to put the order to a referendum, which could be done at the upcoming election. And so the reason why the legal department thinks that it's of questionable enforceability is because it's a limitation on not just free speech, but political speech, which is the most protected type of free speech under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution and the Maine Constitution as well. So if the provision is eliminated, then citizens could sign as many petitions for candidates as they wanted to sign. And then the way that it's been enforced up to this point in time has just basically been the city clerk has kept track. And if the clerk sees a 4th petition signed, they just don't count that signature. And if a candidate needs more signatures, the city clerk would typically just let them know they need more signatures. So that's been the only type of enforcement that's been done on this particular provision. But I welcome any questions that you have.
Any questions? Councilor Fournier?
So I've already signed 3, so now I can sign for Schaefer and for Yakabaga as well.
You can. If we decide to run, yeah. Councilor Schaefer?
Just basically, would it impact if somebody signed for this week? Is that gonna impact ballot eligibility?
Yes.
Okay. So this really would be go into effect for our next election, whether it was,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we live in a small town. People, everyone knows everyone else, and, it's very easy that someone have the same circle of friends, so like, they wanna sign for all of the candidates, but they can't because of the limited, ability here. So, yeah, I think it's a good step.
Need a motion, move
Mhm.
staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. I think it's approved to go to the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what's the next one?
Yes, the next one, also at first reading at the last council, so it's a resolve referral. This is to accept and appropriate $45,000 from the Maine Department of Transportation Carbon Reduction Strategy Plan for the purpose of installing new bicycle racks on all of the community connector buses. And I have Lori Lynn Scott, bus superintendent, on Zoom as well. Essentially, this funding was available. We had purchased a couple bike racks that could accommodate like e-bicycles and some of the fat tire, the larger bicycles. And they're very valuable. They help people with that last mile get to and from the bus system. And so to be able to outfit all of the buses with these racks is a great thing, and it's $3. I do not believe that there's any local match. Lori can correct me if I'm wrong. So a great opportunity for us.
Yes, Councilor.
So are
Conrad.
these able, when we replace buses, they can come off and go on a new bus?
I'm sorry, what?
When we get a new bus, they can come off the old bus?
Oh, yeah, they could be transferred as long as they're in working order, absolutely. Yeah, in our fleet maintenance, they can install them themselves and remove them as well.
Yeah, Councilor.
Do we have a lot of passengers that take bicycles
Lori?
on their buses?
Yeah, great question. I don't have the numbers right now, but we are tracking that with our new technology system. So I'll be able to give you better data in the future. But yeah, we do carry a lot of bikes.
Councilor Schaefer.
I feel like I regularly see I mean, maybe it's the ones that just come by Hudson, but I feel like I always see bikes on the buses. You have motion, move staff recommendation on this?
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, so it's approved.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And actually, this goes right into, we wanted to also give a quick community connector update. As Lori mentioned, we are rolling out transit technology. And part of that is things like passenger counters, bicycles, things of that nature. It also will help with bus tracking. So folks will eventually be able to easily plan their trips and understand where the bus is, where the closest bus stop is, and things of that nature. I do think it's important to note that we have learned that the app was prematurely released on Apple. And so, but the system's not ready to go live yet. And so while you can download it, if you do that, it will indicate that the app's not available to function quite yet. And so as we move through this process, we'll keep you updated, but there will be, we'll launch a full press release once it's ready to make sure folks out there, especially our riders, are aware of this new tool, where they can download an app and get real-time information about the system and the bus stops and things of that nature. And the other piece I think Lori's really excited about too is that this technology, it's a little more complicated than we originally anticipated. The bus has been operating for decades now, and so this is a big upgrade for us as a system. It's new to our drivers. They'll have iPads, things of that nature that tell them where to go, their timing, things like that. But there's also things like automatic automatic announcements, trip announcements, as well as like screens that will showcase the next stop and things, which is a great leap in terms of accessibility. So that's fantastic news. And I would say we're a little reluctant to give a timeline, but we are, we're still working through that. So hopefully this fall, this winter, I'll be coming back with a much larger update, and be releasing things to the public around that app and other helpful information. Lori, anything you'd like to add to that piece?
No, not really, just except for it will bring us, a lot closer to getting those numbers that I know, Dan, you have wanted for years. So we'll be able to give you automatic passenger counters that will know people boarding and getting off the bus. And we'll also know all their fare types and how they're paying, so we can move into the next phase.
Yeah, that is, right now it's all hand counted for the most part. And so to be able to have the automatic rider counter means that our ridership numbers will be far more uniform and accurate across the system. So that's fantastic news. It also plays into our formula funding for the money we get to help fund the system as well. So having hard data around that and the reporting requirements that we have to fulfill to get that funding, this system will be really helpful with that as well. Which kind of leads right into bus stops. We are, as you know, we have moved from a flag, or moving, I should say, from a flag stop to a fixed stop system. We're in a transition that goes through the end of the year. So what that means is you can still flag down the bus, but generally when you're getting off the bus, they will take you to the closest bus stop. And we, as we are nearing completion, we're kind of at that point where everything's kind of in hold pattern right now, so that all of the very specific coordinates and details can be added into the new technology. Because there's over, I think, Lori, are we up over like 400 stops at this point?
Yeah, we're over 400.
So that's like anytime you move a stop, there's a lot of work on the back end that has to be completed. And we've worked through various issues with various bus stops in both residential and commercial areas, depending on feedback from the drivers or from the folks on the ground that live in that area or work in that area and things of that nature. But if you hear anything for the next few weeks, we're going to be pretty limited in being able to make those adjustments until the tech piece is in place. But certainly in the long term, we'll be evaluating these bus stops. We'll have a much better system in place to tracking like what bus stops are the most frequented, the most used most heavily, what next steps will be necessary for infrastructure improvements for these bus stops, whether that's a shelter, curb cut, things of that nature. So that's all great news. And again, I can't stress enough that this transition will go through the end of this year and be effective in January of 2025 in terms of needing to be at a bus stop to board or off board a bus. And then something else that's like kind of really exciting, I think, is that Lori has managed in conversations with the Southern Maine Transit Agency to reacquire trolleys again, which is they're a community favorite, quite honestly. We have had trolleys in the past, and either they got to the point where they were no longer worth investing in to keep them on the road, or one was involved in an accident. And so these are 3 trolleys. They're in great, fantastic shape. They're being worked on right now. We hope to have one roadworthy soon, another one used as a spare, and then the third will actually provide parts to hopefully keep the other 2 on the road longer. And the most fantastic thing I personally think is not only did we acquire them from another agency here in Maine, but they were actually made in Maine. Which is kind of a unique thing, I think. I don't know about you, but I didn't necessarily know that we made trolleys here in Maine. So I think it's kind of awesome. They're known as the Molly trolleys. And they look pretty fantastic, and they'll be painted the same color as the rest of the buses. So they'll be very distinguished, if you will. And we typically use them for special events and things like election day and stuff to boost morale and get people excited about the system, but also obviously get them where they need to go. So, and our partners have been made aware, and they're pretty excited too. So, I think this is great news. And we'll let you know when we actually get one on the road. And then and actually, while I'm talking about that, once we do get one on the road, if you would like a tour of the transit center and the cold bus barn, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, we would love to do that on a trolley to show you around. So we'll definitely throw out some dates, and hopefully many of you can join us, which will be fantastic. So the last 2 pieces, have to do, you know, it's probably been a while since I have had to talk about staffing issues at the community connector. We did pretty well for a while. However, we are back to having some vacancies, and are searching for folks that have their Class B license. We can help them get the endorsements that they need in order to actually drive a transit bus. But the Class B is really important. And so we plan on doing some more targeted outreach and education and things. But always appreciate help spreading the word, for anybody you know that might be interested in joining, our team of bus drivers. And then lastly, just a refresher that the cold bus barn, which is the storage barn for all of our buses, it's an old military building. We've had it a long time. A warm section was added to the back that holds ADA vans back in, I believe, 2004. And it also has a bus wash. It's a very large building. In fact, when you're driving on Main Avenue, it's actually sewer now, but it used to be the old recycling area on the front there. That's the building that I'm talking about. And so the roof leaks, we're moving toward or attempting to move toward electrification, and that building just does not meet the needs for any of that. And so Lori was able to successfully get a bus and bus facilities grant of about $8 million with a $2 million grant for a total of about 10 million to rehab and electrify that building. And it will include like a classroom with washrooms and things like that as well. So this would be a huge upgrade for the current system. And it would be fantastic. We have tonight on the finance committee, we'll see a bid award for the design services for this building. This is the first step in the project. It will take multiple years, obviously, before you actually see like a new fancy building or rehabbed building, I should say, in place of the current one. And so, yeah, I guess I'll save the rest of that for finance committee. Lori, do you have anything else that you would like to share?
No, I'm good. I think that's good. Oh, yeah, one thing, of that, grant, that DOT did, offer 10% of a local match. So they're going to give us $1 million toward that project just to give them their.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's an important point. I always like it when the local shares produce. That's fantastic, but happy to answer any questions about Community Connector.
Any questions? Okay, I think each time I want to ask about extending hours, we have the problem of shortage in staff. So I'm not gonna ask that question.
Yeah, well, I would just say, hopefully between all these moving pieces, once they start to click together between the rehab building, the tech, you know, trolleys for increased ridership, whatever it is, hopefully together, we are, and I would just mention that our ridership is on the upswing. We're not quite at pre-pandemic levels, but we did, I just looked at the ridership for fiscal year 24, which ended in June, and it was up 33% from the year before, which is over 130,000 rides. So we are moving back in the right direction. And we hope to continue that trend, and hopefully the transit center, the trolleys, like all these pieces coming together will encourage more ridership, and get the system back where we would all love it to be, which in turn, in theory, helps in the long run with us better supporting the system as a whole.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a thorough update.
Good.
Okay, so with the last item.
Yes, the assistant city manager updates is the last item. I just had a couple of items. I apologize. I wasn't able to get things in your packet in time. However, I did want to touch on them. First is the council appointee evaluations. For those at home that may not know, the city council oversees 4 specific positions in the city. That's the city manager, city solicitor, city assessor, and city clerk. And so you are all responsible for their annual performance evaluations. And last year we actually went through a lengthy process to update that process system to do things like get stakeholder evaluations, and self-evaluations from the appointees for your consideration when you go through your own evaluation of each appointee. And we do that actually through SurveyMonkey. Before it was all paper and that was not good. I'm just saying. So I think we've done a great job in terms of streamlining that process. However, this year is being an election year, a presidential election year, especially for the city clerk. She's quite busy by the time October rolls around, which is usually when we do the evaluations. And so we're trying to kick that process off a little earlier this year so that we're able to have you meet with the appointees in early October. And that way it's off her plate as we all move through the busy election time. And so what you may have noticed is that I did send out an email. All that email was the list of the different internal and external stakeholders for each appointee. If you have feedback for like you think a position was missed or something of that nature, let me know as soon as possible, because I will be sending out the evaluations to those individuals this week with a deadline of August 19th for them to get feedback. As well as the appointees to get their self-evaluations back. And then I compile all that information and I put together a packet for you that includes best practice information, the evaluation forms and feedbacks, employment contract, prior year evaluation summaries and goals. So hopefully you have a complete package when you are going through and actually evaluating on your own for each individual appointee. And I would just point out too, that each appointee does have its own evaluation committee made up of several counselors, but we really stress and think it's really important that you all provide feedback for each appointee so they better understand how they're doing or what you might want them to do better, or what you think their strengths are, things of that nature. And so once those packets are completed, I will send them out along with the with the evaluations for you all. I expect the week of August 26th, and they would be due back September 23rd. So that gives you about a month or so to do those evaluations. And then I will seek to schedule the actual evaluations for you to sit down with each appointee over the following 2 weeks. So hopefully we're able to wrap up no later than the second week of October, because again, things get really busy, and I've learned just in the few years that I've been here that this process seems to like fly by so quickly. So trying to get ahead of it this year. And so if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. I can certainly share things like what questions are being asked and things of that nature, but the evaluation that you all fill out for the appointee was purposely redone to be a little more reflective of your relationship with your appointees, as opposed to like more internal, like staff sort of review. And the same evaluation that you all fill out is the one that the appointees do on themselves. So you're comparing kind of apples to apples in terms of how you think they're doing versus how they believe they're doing. And you have standard kind of information to help you take into consideration when you're evaluating, because one of the big points that I've heard in the past is that, I have to evaluate them on this, but I don't really see it myself, or, I'm not knowledgeable on this, like I don't really know. And so all of that's been taken into account in terms of the evaluation process to help streamline it and really create that connection between you and your appointee without hopefully overburdening anybody. So if anybody's confused or has questions, please let me know as we move through this.
Councilor Fournier, yes, please.
Can we shorten that from a month to respond from counselors?
Yep.
Maybe 3 weeks, just to shorten it,
Absolutely.
Well,
You're all
because
welcome.
the election.
Yep.
I'd rather get it done.
Yeah.
Well ahead of time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, ideally, the very end of September, very beginning of October, we can set the actual meetings for you all to sit down with them. That would be fantastic. I know Lisa would breathe a sigh of relief, I'm sure.
Awesome. Any questions? Looks like that's it.
Great.
So we're done.
Yes, that is it.
Then we're adjourned, and we have another committee, right?
Yes,
Finance. So
finance.
stay tuned.